I will never forget the sound of my own key failing in the lock on Christmas Eve. Snow was falling over my porch in quiet white
Happy
sheets,
holidays,
the kind
baby.
my late husband
I
Harold
brought
used
the
to call
medicine.
God's blanket.
I think you should leave.
I stood there with my blood pressure medicine in one hand and two small wrapped gifts for my grandchildren in the other, staring through the front window at my own living room glowing with Christmas lights. Then my daughter-in-law, Lauren Brooks, opened the door just wide enough for her face to show. "You can't come in, Diana," she said. "This isn't your house anymore." What Lauren didn't know was that Harold had left behind one hidden clause, and by locking me out, she had just ruined everything she planned. If this story touches something in your heart, please like this video and subscribe. And tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were standing outside your own home on Christmas Eve. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Long before my daughter-in-law locked me outside on Christmas Eve, before snow gathered on my coat and my own front door became a stranger to me, there was only one thing that truly mattered in my life. That house. Most people would have driven past it without a second glance. It sat quietly at the end of Maple Hollow Lane, a white two-story home with faded blue shutters and a porch that creaked every autumn. The mailbox leaned slightly to the left. The maple tree in the front yard had grown so large that its branches touched the upstairs windows every October. But to me, that house was not wood. It was my marriage. It was my son. It was my entire life. My husband, Harold Brooks, bought the property when we were both 26 years old. We could barely afford it. The roof leaked during storms. The kitchen cabinets were warped. Half the upstairs wallpaper was peeling away from the walls. I remember standing inside the empty living room on our first day there, worried we had made a terrible mistake. Harold simply smiled. "Give me a few years," he said. "You'll make this place beautiful." And he did. Harold was a carpenter. His hands were rough, his shoulders broad, and his work boots always carried sawdust into the house no matter how often I swept the floors. Every Saturday he repaired something. He built bookshelves beside the fireplace because he knew I loved novels. He added a window above the kitchen sink because he wanted me to see the sunrise while washing dishes. He built a porch swing because he said one day we would grow old together sitting there. When Michael was born, Harold spent 3 weekends building his nursery. He painted little stars on the ceiling because our son loved looking upward. When Michael learned to ride a bicycle, Harold ran beside him down our street until his knees hurt. When Michael graduated high school, Harold cried harder than I did. That house watched all of it. Every Christmas carried its own memory. Michael racing downstairs before dawn, Harold pretending to hear reindeer on the roof, the smell of cinnamon and sugar filling the kitchen, the old record player singing carols, the same handmade ornaments returning to the tree every year. People sometimes say houses cannot love you back. I disagree. Some houses hold your life so carefully that they become part of your heart. Then 4 years ago, Harold died. Even now, saying those words still hurts. Heart failure. The doctors tried. The nurses were kind. The machines were loud. But none of it changed the outcome. I lost my husband after 43 years of marriage. For weeks afterward, I moved through the house like a ghost. I slept on only one side of the bed. I kept hearing his footsteps in the hallway. Sometimes I would begin speaking from the kitchen and realize halfway through the sentence that nobody was there to answer. People told me I should sell. Diana. The house is too big. You shouldn't live alone. Why don't you move into a retirement community? You could get a nice apartment. They meant well, but they did not understand. Leaving that house would have felt like losing Harold twice. Michael visited often during that first year. He checked the furnace, cleaned the gutters, carried heavy boxes into the attic, and sat with me during difficult evenings. Sometimes we drank coffee in the kitchen. Sometimes we watched old baseball games. Sometimes we simply sat in silence, I remember one afternoon, he looked around the living room and said quietly, "Dad is still everywhere in this house." I smiled. "Yes," I told him, "and I think he likes it that way." At that time, I believed my son understood exactly why I stayed. Then Michael met Lauren. At first, I truly loved her. She was beautiful, confident, organized, and intelligent. She brought flowers when she visited. She complimented my cooking. She called me Mrs. Brooks until I insisted she call me Diana. When Michael proposed, I cried because I thought my son had found happiness. During the wedding, Harold's photograph sat in the front pew. Lauren held my hand afterward and said, "I promise I'll always take care of Michael." I believed her. Perhaps that was my first mistake. After Emma and Noah were born, the house felt alive again. Tiny shoes appeared near the doorway. Coloring books covered my coffee table. Noah built blanket forts in the living room. Emma loved listening to stories beside the fireplace. Those children brought laughter back into rooms that had become too quiet. I baked cookies with them every December. We decorated the Christmas tree together. We watched old holiday movies wrapped in blankets. For a while, I thought the future looked exactly the way Harold and I had once imagined. 3 generations, 1 family, 1 home. But slowly, almost so slowly that I hardly noticed, things began changing. Lauren started making comments. "The furniture is very old-fashioned. You have too many family photos. This room could look much bigger. You really don't need all this space." At first, I thought she was simply interested in decorating. She worked in home design after all. She took pictures of rooms, measured walls, asked questions about renovations, asked when the roof had last been replaced, asked whether the mortgage had been paid, asked whose name was on the deed. I answered without concern. Why wouldn't I? She was family. One afternoon, while drinking tea in my kitchen, Lauren looked around and said something I never forgot. "This house must be worth a fortune now." I laughed. "I honestly have no idea." She smiled. "You should know. It's probably the most valuable thing your family owns." The sentence seemed harmless, but for some reason it stayed with me. Harold rarely talked about money. He believed homes were meant to protect people, not enrich them. A few months before he died, he met several times with Margaret Ellis, our family attorney. He called it taking care of paperwork. One evening, after returning from her office, he sat beside me on the porch swing. The sun was setting. Leaves were falling. His hand rested on mine. "Diana," he said softly, "promise me something." "What?" "Never let anyone make you feel unwelcome here." I laughed. "Who would do that?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the house, toward the windows, toward the life we had built together. Finally, he said, "People change when money becomes involved. Even good people." I remember telling him he worried too much. He smiled. Maybe he did, or maybe he understood something that I didn't. Because years later, standing outside my own front door, while snow fell around me, I would remember every word he had spoken, and I would realize that Harold Brooks had not only built me a home, he had spent his final days building something else, something invisible, something hidden, something my daughter-in-law never saw coming. The first time I met Lauren Brooks, I remember thinking that my son had finally found the woman who would make him happy. She arrived at my front door carrying white roses and a bottle of wine. Her blonde hair was neatly pinned back. Her winter coat looked expensive, and her smile seemed warm enough to melt snow. "You must be Diana," she said as she hugged me. "Michael talks about you all the time." I remember laughing. "Only the good things, I hope." She smiled. So far, Michael stood beside her, looking happier, than I had seen him in years. After several difficult relationships and long periods of working too much, he finally looked settled. As a mother, that was all I wanted. That evening, we sat around my dining table eating roast chicken and mashed potatoes while snow drifted past the windows. Lauren asked about Harold. She admired the old family photographs hanging in the hallway. She complimented my cooking at least 3 times. Before leaving, she stopped in the living room and looked around. "This house feels special," she said. I smiled. "It is. At the time, I thought she meant the memories. Now I know she may have been seeing something entirely different." Their wedding took place the following spring. It was small, simple, and beautiful. Michael cried while reading his vows. Lauren looked radiant. I placed a photograph of Harold on the front pew because I could not imagine our son getting married without his father somehow present. After the ceremony, Lauren squeezed my hand. "I promise, I'll always take care of Michael." I hugged her. "And you're part of this family now." I meant every word. The first year of their marriage felt peaceful. They rented a townhouse 20 minutes away. We had Sunday dinners together. Michael called often. Lauren brought desserts. Holidays still felt like family. Then small things began to change. Not dramatic things, tiny things. The kind that can easily be ignored. One afternoon, Lauren walked through my living room and said, "You know, if these curtains were lighter, this room would look much bigger." I laughed. "These curtains have been here 20 years. That explains them." The comment sounded playful. But it stayed with me. A few weeks later, she suggested replacing my dining room table. "This style isn't really popular anymore." I looked down at the table. Harold had built it by hand. Every Christmas dinner, every birthday cake, every family gathering had happened around that table. "I like it," I said quietly. Lauren smiled. "Of course. I'm just saying modern buyers usually prefer something different." "Buyers?" The word caught my attention. "Buyers?" I asked. She laughed. "Oh, occupational habit. Sorry." Lauren worked in home staging and interior design. She helped people prepare houses for sale. At the time, I assumed her comments were simply professional habits. Still, I began noticing how often she looked at the house itself. She measured rooms. She photographed walls. She asked questions. "How old is the roof? When was the kitchen remodeled? Did Harold pay off the mortgage? How much land comes with the property?" At first, I answered naturally. She was family. Why wouldn't I? One Sunday afternoon, she stood beside the front window studying the neighborhood. "Property values around here have increased a lot," she said. "I suppose so. This house must be worth a fortune." I shrugged. "I honestly don't know." She looked surprised. "You've never had it appraised." "No. You really should." The conversation left me uncomfortable, though I couldn't explain why. Michael noticed my silence while washing dishes later that evening. "You okay, Mom?" "Yes. You seem upset." I hesitated. "Does Lauren always talk about houses this much?" He laughed. "It's her job." I wanted to believe him. Then Emma was born. Everything changed for a while. Lauren became softer after becoming a mother. Michael seemed happier. The house filled with baby toys, bottles, and laughter. When Noah arrived 2 years later, the chaos doubled. And honestly, I loved every second of it. Emma liked sitting beside me while I read stories. Noah followed me through the kitchen, asking endless questions. I bought coloring books, puzzles, and tiny Christmas pajamas. For a while, I felt useful again. Needed. Loved. But somewhere underneath those happy moments, Lauren continued changing. She began making decisions for family gatherings. Christmas for family gatherings. Christmas dinners. birthdays, Thanksgiving. Slowly, my opinions mattered less. Let's order catering. We don't need all these decorations. Your recipes are a little old-fashioned. People don't really do things this way anymore. Dinners, birthdays, Thanksgiving. Slowly, my opinions mattered less. Let's order catering. We don't need all these decorations. Your recipes are a little old-fashioned. People don't really do things this way anymore. Sometimes Michael agreed with her. Sometimes he simply stayed quiet. The silence bothered me more. One afternoon, I found Lauren taking photographs inside the master bedroom. "Oh," she said quickly, "I'm collecting design ideas." I nodded, but something inside me felt uneasy. A few weeks later, she asked me a question that surprised me. "Whose name is actually on the deed I looked up from my coffee?" "What do you mean, the house?" "Harold handled most of that. Michael doesn't know either." I frowned slightly. "Why does it matter?" She smiled. "It doesn't. I was just curious." But I wasn't curious. I was worried. Not because of the question itself. Because of the way she asked it. Carefully. Like someone gathering information. That winter, Michael and Lauren began talking about money more often. Private school tuition, mortgage payments, business expenses. Lauren wanted to open her own design company someday. Michael worked long hours managing logistics for a shipping company. Life was expensive. I understood that. Still, I noticed something. Whenever money entered the conversation, the house somehow appeared too. The property alone could change everything. It's such valuable real estate. Most people your age downsize. You don't need all this space. At first, these were scattered comments. Then they became regular. One evening after dinner, Lauren stood beside Harold's old bookshelves. "Imagine what this place could look like after renovations." I answered quietly, "I already know what it looks like." She looked confused. "This is what it looks like." She forced a smile. "You know what I mean." Maybe I did. Maybe I simply didn't want to. The strangest moment came several months later. I was putting dishes away when I overheard Lauren speaking to someone on the phone in the hallway. She didn't realize I was nearby. "The house is incredible," she said softly. She paused. "Honestly, it won't stay this way forever." Another pause. "Yes, eventually things will change." When she turned and saw me standing there, she smiled immediately. "Oh, I was talking about a client." I nodded, but something inside me had already shifted. That night, I walked through the dark house after everyone left. I touched Harold's chair, the dining table, the staircase railing he had sanded himself. For the first time since his death, I felt something I had never experienced inside those walls. Fear. Not fear of being alone. Not fear of aging. Fear that someone else had begun looking at my home and seeing only numbers. And although I did not know it yet, Lauren Brooks had already started imagining a future where the house belonged to everyone except the woman who still slept inside it. The first time I realized I was becoming a guest in my own family, it happened over something as small as Sunday dinner. For nearly 30 years, every Sunday evening had belonged to our family. Even when Michael was in college, he came home when he could. After he married Lauren, the tradition continued for a while. I cooked. Michael brought dessert. The grandchildren played in the living room. Those dinners had once felt effortless, but gradually they began changing. One Sunday afternoon, I spent nearly 3 hours preparing roast beef mashed potatoes, green beans, and Harold's favorite apple pie recipe. I set the dining table with the dishes we always used for family meals. At 5 o'clock, nobody had arrived. At 5:30, I called Michael. He sounded surprised. "Mom, didn't Lauren tell you?" Tell me what we moved dinner to our place tonight. I stood in my kitchen still holding the phone. No, I said quietly. She didn't. Oh, there was a long silence. I thought she called you. After we hung up, I sat alone at the dining room table staring at 6 empty chairs. The food grew cold. The candles burned down. For the first time in many years, I ate Sunday dinner by myself. The following morning, Lauren called. Oh my goodness, Diana, I thought Michael told you. Her voice sounded cheerful. I guess we both forgot. I wanted to believe her, so I did. But similar things kept happening. Family outings, school events, birthday plans, little gatherings. Somehow I often learned about them afterward. One afternoon, I saw photographs online of Emma's school recital. Everyone had attended. Everyone except me. When I asked Michael, he looked uncomfortable. Lauren thought it might be too crowded. I've attended every recital since Emma was 4. I know. Then why didn't anyone ask me? He rubbed his forehead. Mom, please don't make this a problem. That sentence hurt more than I expected. Because I wasn't trying to create a problem. I was trying to understand when I had stopped being included. Lauren had another talent I didn't recognize at first. She never insulted me directly. She simply planted small doubts. One evening during dinner, I forgot where I had placed my reading glasses. Lauren smiled. Oh, that happens to my grandmother all the time. I laughed politely. A week later, I repeated a story about Noah's soccer game. Lauren said gently, You already told us that, Diana. Another time I became emotional while talking about Harold. Lauren reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Grief can really affect memory. Michael looked concerned. I've noticed Mom repeating herself too. I felt my stomach tighten. Everyone repeats themselves. Everyone forgets things. But suddenly, normal moments began feeling like evidence. Once I overheard Lauren speaking to one of her friends in the kitchen. She's still doing okay, Lauren said quietly. A pause. But honestly, living alone at her age worries me. I stopped in the hallway. Living alone, at her age. Those words stayed with me. Not because I believed them, because I realized someone else wanted people to believe them. My closest friend and neighbor, Evelyn Carter, noticed the changes before I admitted them to myself. Evelyn lived next door. She was 70 and had lost her own husband several years before Harold died. We drank tea together, shared recipes. We drank tea together, shared recipes, and checked on one another after snowstorms. One afternoon, she sat at my kitchen table. Something's bothering you. Nothing. She gave me a look. You forget I've known you 15 years. I sighed. Maybe I'm imagining things. And checked on one another after snowstorms. One afternoon, she sat at my kitchen table. Something's bothering you. Nothing. She gave me a look. You forget I've known you 15 years. I sighed. Maybe I'm imagining things. Try me. I hesitated. Lauren acts as if I'm becoming a burden. Evelyn stirred her tea. And Michael, he stays quiet. That can be worse. I looked down at my hands. I don't want conflict. Neither do I, Evelyn said. But conflict has a way of arriving, whether we invite it or not. The hardest part wasn't Lauren. I expected very little from my daughter-in-law. The hardest part was watching Michael slowly pull away. He stopped dropping by alone. Phone calls became shorter. Conversations felt careful. Sometimes he looked exhausted. Other times, he seemed distracted. Whenever I mentioned concerns about Lauren, he defended her. She's stressed. She means well. You know how hard things are right now. I knew they had financial problems. Lauren wanted to start her own business. Michael worked long hours. The children were growing. Everything cost more. But none of those problems explained why I increasingly felt unwelcome. The change became obvious during Thanksgiving. For over 40 years, Thanksgiving had been my holiday. Harold carved the turkey. Michael watched football. I baked pies. The grandchildren played games. That year, Lauren arrived carrying several large boxes. "What are those?" I asked. "Decorations? For Thanksgiving?" She smiled. I wanted something more modern. She removed several centerpieces I had used for years, including one Harold had made. "It looks dated," she explained. I stood there holding the wooden centerpiece while she arranged her own decorations across the table. Michael said nothing. Dinner itself felt different. Lauren directed everything: where people sat, when food was served, what music played, even which dishes remained on the table. At one point, Emma asked if Grandma would tell the story about Grandpa burning the turkey. Lauren laughed. "Oh, we've heard that story enough." Emma looked disappointed. "No, we haven't." Lauren changed the subject. "After everyone left, I washed dishes alone." The kitchen felt strangely quiet. Harold's photograph sat above the counter. I looked at him. "I don't know what I'm doing wrong," I whispered. Of course, photographs don't answer. But sometimes silence feels like company. Several weeks later, I visited the grocery store and ran into a woman from church. She smiled warmly. "How are you adjusting to moving, dear?" I stared at her. "What moving?" She looked confused. "Oh, I thought your daughter-in-law said you were considering assisted living." My blood ran cold. "I never said that." "Oh." She immediately looked embarrassed. I must have misunderstood, but I knew she hadn't. Somewhere, somehow, that conversation had happened. That evening, I called Michael. "Did Lauren tell people I'm moving?" He sounded tired. "She only mentioned that you've talked about future options." "I haven't." Silence. "Mom, maybe she misunderstood." "No, Michael. She didn't misunderstand." He exhaled heavily. "Please don't fight with her." Fight with her? Again? The responsibility somehow belonged to me. A few days before Christmas, Emma asked me a question while helping decorate cookies. "Grandma." "Yes, sweetheart, are you moving away?" The rolling pin slipped from my fingers. "Who told you that?" She looked nervous. "Mommy said maybe." I forced a smile. "I'm not going anywhere." Emma hugged me. "Good. Grandpa's here." Children often understand things adults miss. To Emma, Grandpa still lived in the house. In the photographs, the stories, the Christmas ornaments, the porch swing. And perhaps that was exactly what bothered Lauren, because by then she wasn't simply trying to change the furniture. She wasn't simply criticizing traditions. She was slowly removing me from my own family, one conversation at a time. And the most painful part was realizing that my son was watching it happen. He simply didn't know how to stop it. Or perhaps he no longer wanted to. As Christmas approached, I told myself things would improve. The holidays always brought families together. The children would laugh. The tree would glow. The old traditions would return. But I didn't understand that Lauren had already begun planning a very different Christmas. And in her plans, there was very little room left for me. By the time December arrived, the house no longer felt entirely like mine. That may sound strange to some people. After all, I still slept in the same bedroom. I still paid the utility bills. I still watered the plants Harold had planted years earlier. But something invisible had changed. You can feel it when people begin treating your memories like clutter. You can feel it when your opinions become optional. And you can certainly feel it when someone starts making plans for your home without asking you. The first sign came right after Thanksgiving. Lauren called me one afternoon. "I've decided we're doing Christmas at your house this year." I smiled. That sounds wonderful. It'll be easier for everyone. Of course. For a moment, I genuinely felt relieved. Christmas had always belonged to our house. Even after Harold died, I had continued decorating every room exactly as we always had. The handmade stockings, the old nativity set, the glass ornaments Michael made in elementary school, Harold's wooden angel that sat above the fireplace every December. I thought perhaps our family was returning to old traditions. I couldn't have been more wrong. A few days later, Lauren arrived, carrying several storage bins. "What are those?" I asked. "New decorations?" She walked into the living room as if she owned it. "I want this year's theme to be elegant." I laughed softly. "Christmas has a theme." "Of course." She opened the bins. Everything inside was silver, white, and gold. Expensive ornaments, artificial garland, decorative candles, matching ribbons. She looked around my living room. "We'll need to remove some things." "Remove?" "These decorations clash." She pointed toward the ornaments Michael had made as a child. "These are cute, but they don't really fit." I looked at the tiny paper angel Michael made in 2nd grade. Harold had insisted we hang it every single year. "He was 8 years old," I said. Lauren smiled. "We can save them for the grandchildren's room." One by one, the decorations that had filled my Christmases disappeared into boxes. Harold's wooden angel, the handmade ornaments, the old stockings, even the ceramic Santa my mother had given me. "It looks cleaner this way," Lauren said. Cleaner. That word hurt, as if our memories had somehow become clutter. A week later, she rearranged my dining room. The table remained, but nearly everything else changed. She brought new centerpieces, new candles, new dishes. She even removed the small framed photograph of Harold that always sat beside the china cabinet. I found it in a drawer. Lauren. "Oh, I didn't think it matched the room." I picked up Harold's photograph. "He belongs here." She looked uncomfortable. I didn't mean anything by it. Perhaps she didn't. Or perhaps she did. Michael continued saying very little. Whenever I looked at him, he seemed tired, distracted, almost nervous. One evening, while Lauren was upstairs, I sat with him in the kitchen. "Are you all right?" "Sure. You seem stressed." He rubbed his eyes. "Work has been difficult." "What about Lauren?" He hesitated. "What about her? Is everything okay?" He forced a smile. "We've just got a lot going on." I waited. Eventually he said, "Lauren wants to expand her business." "That sounds exciting." "It is." "But," he sighed, "starting a business costs money." I nodded. He stared into his coffee. "The kids are getting older. The school district where we live isn't great. Everything is expensive." I reached across the table. "You'll figure it out?" He looked at me. "I hope so." The conversation ended there, but something about it stayed with me. 2 days later, I walked into my own kitchen and found a woman I had never met sitting at my table. Lauren introduced her immediately. "Diana, this is Rebecca Mason." The woman smiled warmly. "Nice to meet you. What brings you here?" "Oh, Rebecca works in real estate staging." Lauren answered quickly. "We've worked together before." Rebecca complimented the house repeatedly. "The woodwork is incredible. The kitchen is charming. The neighborhood is wonderful." She walked through several rooms with Lauren. They spoke quietly, measured spaces, looked through windows, examined the basement. I tried telling myself they were discussing decorating ideas, but my instincts were becoming harder to ignore. At one point, I walked into the dining room unexpectedly. Rebecca was looking out the front window. "This property alone is worth a lot." Lauren noticed me standing there. Oh, we're just talking shop. I smiled politely, but something inside me felt cold. After Rebecca left, I asked Michael about her. She's a friend of Lauren's. She seemed very interested in the house. He shrugged. That's her business. Again, everything had an explanation. Everything made sense. And yet nothing felt right. A few days later, I was searching for wrapping paper in the guest room closet when I found a folder sitting inside one of Lauren's bags. I had no intention of looking through it, truly. But one page had slipped partially out. Across the top, I read 4 words: comparative market analysis. My hands froze. Beneath the title was my address, my house. Several pages listed estimated values, local sales, property comparisons, potential market price. I carefully returned the papers exactly where I found them. For several minutes, I simply stood alone in the closet. Perhaps there was an explanation. There always seemed to be one. But why would Lauren need an estimate of my home's value? That evening, I decided to speak with Michael. We sat in the living room while Christmas music played softly in the background. Michael. Yeah, why does Lauren have property reports for this house? He became still. What reports? I found a market analysis. His eyes immediately dropped. It wasn't anger. It wasn't surprise. It was something worse. Recognition. Mom. Why? He rubbed his face. Lauren was curious. Curious about selling my house? No. Then what? He took a long breath. We've talked about future possibilities. What possibilities? He didn't answer immediately. The house is large. I stared at him. You want me to move? No. But maybe someday? I felt as though the room had suddenly become smaller. Did you discuss this with me? He looked miserable. No. Then why are you discussing it with real estate agents, Mom, please? No, Michael. My voice trembled. This is my home. He looked toward the kitchen where Lauren was speaking to the children. We're just trying to think ahead. Ahead. As if my future had become a problem to solve. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through every room. The living room, the kitchen, the upstairs hallway, Harold's workshop. I touched the walls he had painted, the shelves he had built, the banister he had sanded. For the first time, I began wondering whether the conversations happening around me had already gone much further than I realized. And yet, Christmas was only 2 weeks away. I told myself families sometimes struggle. Money creates stress. People say foolish things. Surely the holidays would bring everyone back together. Surely Christmas would remind us what mattered. But while I was wrapping gifts for my grandchildren, Lauren was already making plans of her own. Plans that had very little to do with Christmas, and far too much to do with my house. The conversation that finally broke my heart happened 3 days before Christmas. Until then, I had spent months convincing myself that I was imagining things. Maybe Lauren was stressed. Maybe Michael was overwhelmed. Maybe money problems were making everyone anxious. Perhaps I was simply becoming more sensitive as I grew older. But deep down, another voice kept whispering that something was terribly wrong. That voice became impossible to ignore on a cold Tuesday evening. The sky had already turned dark when Michael stopped by alone. Lauren had taken the children to a school event, and for the first time in weeks, my son sat at my kitchen table without anyone else present. I poured coffee for both of us. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles beneath his eyes, and he kept rubbing his forehead as if carrying an invisible weight. Finally, I asked the question I had been avoiding. Michael, is Lauren trying to sell my house? His hand froze around the coffee cup. He didn't answer. That silence frightened me more than words. Michael. He exhaled slowly. No. I waited. Not exactly. Not exactly. Those two words settled into my chest like ice. What does that mean? He looked down at the table. We've talked about options. What options? The house is large. I know. You live alone? I know that too. His voice became softer. Mom, you're 68. I stared at him. Is that old now? No. Then why are we talking like I'm dying? He immediately shook his head. No one's saying that, but everyone keeps acting like I'm leaving. He didn't answer. The kitchen suddenly felt smaller. Outside, snow had begun falling lightly across the backyard. The same backyard where Harold had taught him to throw a baseball. The same yard where Emma built snowmen. The same yard where Noah chased fireflies during summer evenings. I looked directly at my son. Do you want me to move? His eyes filled with guilt. I want you to be safe. That's not what I asked. He swallowed. No, but... He rubbed his hands together. Lauren thinks eventually it might make sense. Eventually, she worries about you living alone. I've lived alone for 4 years. I know. Nothing has changed. Lauren thinks eventually it might make sense. Eventually, she worries about you living alone. I've lived alone for 4 years. I know. Nothing has changed. His voice grew quieter. She says things can change quickly at your age. At your age. The words stung. Not because they were untrue, because they no longer sounded like my son speaking. They sounded like Lauren. I took a slow breath. Michael, look at me. He finally did. Are you afraid for me? He hesitated. No. Then what are you afraid of? That question sat between us. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then something in him finally cracked. Money. The answer surprised me. What? He leaned back in his chair. We're struggling. I had suspected it. Now I heard it in his voice. The credit cards, the business expenses, the kids' school, the mortgage. He looked embarrassed. Everything keeps getting more expensive. I softened immediately. Why didn't you tell me? He laughed bitterly. What was I supposed to say? That you needed help? You've already done enough. I reached across the table. You're my son. He stared at my hand. Then he said something that frightened me. Lauren thinks the house could solve everything. I slowly pulled my hand back. What does that mean? She thinks if the property were used differently? Used. He closed his eyes. Mom, please don't make me explain this badly. No, I think you need to explain it exactly. He stood up and walked toward the window. For several seconds, he simply stared outside. Then he spoke quietly. He thinks eventually we could renovate. No, I think you need to explain it exactly. He stood up and walked toward the window. For several seconds, he simply stared outside. Then he spoke quietly. She thinks eventually we could renovate. Renovate or refinance. Refinancing requires ownership. Silence. My heartbeat began to quicken. Michael. He didn't turn around. Have you signed something? His shoulders became rigid. Some paperwork. The room suddenly felt cold. What paperwork? Nothing important. Michael. He finally faced me. Lauren said it was estate planning. What estate? She said it would make future decisions easier. What decisions? He looked miserable. I don't know. I stood up. You signed legal documents involving my house? She said it was just preliminary information. Did you read them? His silence answered. I could hardly breathe. Did I sign anything? No. Did anyone ask me? No. Then why are you signing papers involving my home? His voice cracked. I trusted my wife. For the first time that evening, I saw something I had not expected. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of what he might have done. I sat down again. Suddenly, I felt very tired. Harold used to say that weakness doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like avoiding difficult conversations. Sometimes it looks like wanting peace so badly that you allow the wrong person to lead. I looked at my son, and for the first time, I realized he was not the person controlling the situation. Lauren was. He had simply followed. That realization should have comforted me. Instead, it broke my heart. Because a son does not need to become cruel to betray his mother. Sometimes, he only needs to remain quiet. I would never put you out, Michael said. I looked at him carefully. Would Lauren? His eyes immediately dropped. That answer frightened me even more. Has she talked about me moving? A little. How little she mentioned assisted living. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because I suddenly remembered all the conversations, the comments, the questions, the real estate reports, the stories reaching neighbors, Emma asking if I was leaving. Everything suddenly connected. Michael, I said softly, does your wife believe this house belongs to you? He hesitated. Eventually. No. I shook my head. This house belongs to me. He looked ashamed. I know. Do you? His eyes filled with tears. I don't know anything anymore. That sentence hurt, because I believed him. He truly didn't know. He didn't know where his marriage ended and his responsibilities began. He didn't know whether he was protecting his family or losing it. He didn't know that every silence had slowly pushed me farther away. I walked him to the front door. The snow had stopped. Christmas lights glowed along the street. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to stand beside Harold while hanging decorations. Mom, yes, I would never intentionally hurt you. I nodded. I know, but you already have. He lowered his eyes. I don't know how to fix this. Neither did I. After he left, I sat alone beside the Christmas tree. The lights reflected softly against the windows. Harold's ornament hung near the top. The little wooden angel he carved years ago stood above the fireplace. I looked at his photograph. Something is happening, I whispered. And for the first time since his death, I found myself wishing he had been there to tell me what to do. Because somewhere inside me, a terrible feeling had begun to grow. Lauren was moving faster than I realized. Michael had already signed papers he barely understood. Money was involved, plans were being made, and Christmas Eve was only days away. I still believed our family could be saved. I still believed the holidays might heal us. But while I sat beside the tree hoping for peace, Lauren Brooks was preparing to make the cruelest decision of her life. And none of us yet understood how far she was willing to go. Christmas Eve arrived with snow. Not the gentle kind that falls quietly and disappears before morning. This snow came heavily covering the streets, the rooftops, and the bare trees that lined Maple Hollow Lane. By noon, the entire neighborhood looked like a Christmas card. Normally, I love snow. Harold had loved it too. Every year he would stand on the porch with a cup of coffee and say, "If it snows on Christmas Eve, heaven is paying attention." That morning, I tried very hard to believe heaven was still paying attention. Lauren had been preparing for the dinner for days. New decorations covered my living room. The dining table no longer looked like mine. Even the Christmas music playing through the speakers was different. Still, I told myself that none of those things mattered. Emma and Noah would be there. Michael would be there. Family was what mattered. At noon, Lauren handed me a shopping list. "Could you pick up a few things?" I looked down. Whipped cream, medicine, extra batteries, a loaf of bread. The pharmacy was several miles away because my usual prescription had not yet arrived at the local drugstore. "Of course," I said. Michael was carrying boxes into the garage. "Need help?" he asked. "No, sweetheart. I'll be fine." He smiled. "I'll see you soon." Those would be the last normal words he spoke to me that day. I drove carefully through the snow. The pharmacy was crowded. The grocery store was worse. People were rushing through aisles buying forgotten ingredients and last-minute gifts. While standing in line, I saw 2 small ornaments shaped like snowflakes. One blue, one silver. Emma loved blue. Noah loved silver. I bought them, not because they cost much, because traditions matter. As I walked back toward my car, I remembered Harold doing the exact same thing for Michael years earlier. Small surprises, tiny gifts, little moments children carry forever. The drive home took longer than expected. Snow covered the roads. The sky had already darkened by the time I turned onto Maple Hollow Lane. Christmas lights glowed from every house. Smoke rose from chimneys. For a moment, despite everything, I felt peaceful. Then I saw the cars. There were far more than I expected. Several vehicles lined the street. Lauren's relatives, friends, people I barely knew. Music drifted from inside my house. The windows glowed with warm light. I picked up my shopping bags, the medicine, the bread, the ornaments, and I walked toward my front door. I remember every detail. The sound of snow beneath my boots, the cold air against my face, the lights reflecting on the porch railing Harold had built. I inserted my key. Nothing happened. I frowned. Perhaps I hadn't turned it correctly. I tried again. The key would not move. I removed it and looked at it. The same key I had used for years. I inserted it once more. Still nothing. A strange feeling passed through me. I walked around to the side door. That key did not work either. My hands had begun shaking. I went to the back entrance. Again. Nothing. For several seconds, I simply stood there in the snow. Then I heard laughter inside. Music. Voices. The sound of dishes. Christmas. Without me. I knocked. No answer. I knocked harder. Finally, the front door opened slightly. Lauren stood there. Warm air escaped from the house. Behind her, I could see Christmas lights. The tree, people talking, my grandchildren. She did not smile. "What happened?" I asked. Her face remained calm. "We changed the locks." I stared at her. "What? For security? I live here." She folded her arms. "We've been talking about this." "No, we haven't." Her expression hardened. "Diana, please don't do this tonight." The cold suddenly felt much worse. "My key doesn't work. I know." "Lauren." She lowered her voice. "You can't come in?" I honestly thought I had misunderstood. "What did you say?" "You can't come in." Snow landed on my coat. Somewhere inside the house, I heard Emma laughing. I felt dizzy. "This is my home." Lauren looked directly at me. Not anymore. Those 3 words seemed impossible. Not anymore. I looked past her. Where's Michael? He's busy. I want to speak to my son. He doesn't want a scene. The sentence hit me harder than the cold. Michael knows. She didn't answer. Does Michael know you're doing this? Her silence gave me the answer. Inside the house, I suddenly heard Emma. Grandma! My heart nearly stopped. I took 1 step toward the door. Lauren blocked it. She doesn't need to see this. She needs to see her grandmother. She needs a peaceful Christmas. I looked into my own living room. My tree, my fireplace, my husband's photograph, people sitting in my chairs, eating at my table, living inside my house, and I was standing outside. Lauren reached into her purse. She handed me a folded piece of paper. What's this? A motel? I unfolded it. It was an address. A small roadside motel several miles outside town. They have vacancies. I looked up slowly. You expect me to sleep there? Just for now. For now. We think it's best. We. That word. We. As if decisions about my life had already been made. As if I had somehow missed the meeting where everyone decided I no longer belonged. My hands began trembling. Not from the cold, from disbelief. Lauren, her expression remained completely calm. You should go before the roads get worse. At that moment, I heard Michael's voice inside. He was there. He had been there the entire time. Michael. My voice cracked. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then I saw him. He appeared briefly in the hallway. Our eyes met. My son, my only child. The little boy Harold taught to ride a bicycle. The young man who cried at his father's funeral. The man who once promised he would always take care of me. He looked terrified, ashamed, broken. But he did not come outside. He did not walk toward me. He did not say my name. Lauren gently closed the door. The lock clicked, and suddenly there was only silence. The music became muffled. The lights remained glowing behind the curtains. Snow continued falling. I stood alone on my porch. For several minutes, I could not move. I looked down at the small ornaments I had bought for Emma and Noah. 1 blue, 1 silver. The gift bag had fallen into the snow. I bent down and picked it up. My fingers barely worked. I looked at the front door one last time. Harold had built that door. He had painted it himself. He had installed the brass handle. And now I was locked outside it, at 68 years old, on Christmas Eve, by my own daughter-in-law. I could have screamed. I could have pounded on the door. I could have begged. But something inside me became very still, very quiet, very clear. Because suddenly I remembered something Harold had said years earlier. Never let anyone make you feel like a guest in your own home. I looked at the glowing windows one final time. Then I turned away. I did not know where I would go. I did not know what I would do. But I knew one thing. I would not knock on that door a second time. I do not remember driving away from the house. Even now, when I close my eyes, there are missing pieces. The falling snow, the headlights, the sound of my windshield wipers, the ornaments for Emma and Noah resting on the passenger seat. Everything felt unreal. For nearly 45 years, that house had been my safest place. I had walked through its front door thousands of times, as a young bride, as a new mother, as a grieving widow. And now, on Christmas Eve, I had been locked out of it by family. The motel address Lauren had given me sat folded beside me. I looked at it at a red light. The words felt almost insulting, as if I were some inconvenience that needed temporary storage, as if my entire life could fit inside a motel room. I crumpled the paper and placed it back in my purse. I would not go there. Instead, I drove to Evelyn's house. Her porch light was still on. Snow covered the walkway. When I knocked, she opened the door almost immediately. The moment she saw me, her expression changed. "Diana!" I could not speak. She pulled me inside. My coat was covered in snow. My hands were numb. "What happened?" I finally managed 3 words. "They locked me out." For several seconds, she simply stared at me. "Who?" "Michael and Lauren." The silence that followed felt enormous. Evelyn slowly helped me sit down near the fireplace. She brought me tea, a blanket, dry socks, and then she waited. Good friends know when to speak. The best friends know when not to. Eventually, the entire story came out. The changed locks, the closed door, the motel address, Michael standing inside, Lauren telling me the house was no longer mine. Evelyn listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked only one question. "Did Michael actually tell you to leave?" I hesitated. "No." "Did he come outside?" "No." She nodded slowly. "That matters." I looked at her. "Does it?" "Yes. He stood there and did nothing." "And that matters too." I leaned back against the chair. I suddenly felt older than I had ever felt before. The clock showed almost 9 o'clock, Christmas Eve. Families everywhere were opening presents, sharing meals, watching movies, and my grandchildren probably believed I had simply chosen not to come. The thought nearly broke me. I should call Emma. Evelyn gently touched my hand. "Not tonight, but she'll wonder where I am. She's a child." Tears finally came. Real tears. Not the quiet tears I had cried after Harold died. These were different. These tears carried humiliation, rejection, disbelief. Evelyn held me while I cried, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself to admit the truth. My family had abandoned me. Around 10 o'clock, my phone finally rang. Michael. I stared at the screen. Evelyn looked at me. "Are you going to answer?" I did. His voice sounded broken. "Mom." I remained silent. "Mom, please." I finally spoke. "Are you still in my house?" The silence lasted several seconds. "Yes." "My house." "Mom." "No, answer me." He whispered. "Yes." I closed my eyes. "Why didn't you come outside?" "I didn't know what to do." "You knew exactly what to do." His breathing became uneven. "Lauren said if we argued in front of everyone." "Everyone?" I interrupted him. "You mean your guests?" "No. Your wife." He said nothing. I spoke quietly. Your father would be ashamed. The words hurt both of us. I heard him begin to cry. I never wanted this. Then why did it happen? I thought we'd talk after Christmas. I almost laughed. After Christmas. As though locking me outside on Christmas Eve was somehow temporary. As though humiliation could be postponed. As though betrayal came with a calendar. Where are you staying? He asked. I'm safe. Please tell me. No. Mom, I needed you tonight. My voice finally broke. And you stayed inside. He began apologizing, but apologies spoken from inside a warm house to a mother sitting elsewhere in the snow sound very different. Eventually, I ended the call. Not because I hated him, because I could no longer listen. After midnight, when Evelyn had gone upstairs, I remained awake beside the fire. The house was quiet. Outside, snow continued falling. I looked at Harold's old wedding band. I still wore mine. His rested on a chain around my neck. For years after his death, I spoke to him sometimes. Widows do that, not because we expect answers, because love leaves habits behind. Harold, I whispered. My eyes drifted toward the fire. And suddenly I remembered something. An afternoon almost 2 years before he died. Margaret Ellis, the attorney. Harold returning home with a folder. His strange seriousness. Never let anyone make you feel unwelcome here. My heart began beating faster. I stood up. There had been documents, files, a small metal box. I had not looked at it for years. It remained in the house. My house. Locked behind the very doors Lauren had changed. But another memory surfaced. Harold keeping copies. Not in the office. Not in the bedroom. Somewhere else. I looked around Evelyn's living room. Then, suddenly, I knew. The safe deposit envelope. At the bank. The following morning would be Christmas Day. Everything would be closed. But Margaret Ellis would return to work after the holiday, and Margaret had always known everything. Harold trusted her completely. For the first time since standing outside my locked front door, something inside me changed. I had spent the entire evening feeling powerless, rejected, homeless. But Harold had never been careless. He built furniture carefully. He planned carefully. He protected people carefully. Perhaps he had protected me too. The thought felt almost impossible, yet it refused to leave. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, my phone vibrated again. This time, it was a text. Lauren, only 6 words. We need to discuss arrangements. Arrangements. Not an apology, not concern, not Merry Christmas. Arrangements. As if my life had become a problem to organize, as if my future had already been decided. I stared at the message for several moments. Then I put the phone away. For the first time since leaving the house, I was no longer thinking about what Lauren wanted. I was thinking about what Harold had done. Because somewhere hidden inside papers I had ignored for years, there might be answers. And if Harold Brooks had truly anticipated this moment, then my daughter-in-law had made one terrible mistake. She believed she understood ownership. She believed she understood the house. She believed she understood Harold. But she had only seen the walls. She had never understood the man who built them. Christmas morning arrived quietly. For the first time in more than 40 years, I woke up somewhere other than my own house. Evelyn had prepared coffee before I came downstairs. The smell reminded me painfully of Christmas mornings with Harold. He always woke before sunrise, made coffee too strong, and pretended he had heard Santa walking across the roof. But that morning, there was no laughter, no Christmas music, no grandchildren running through the hallway, only silence. Evelyn placed a cup in front of me. "What are you going to do?" I stared into the coffee. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." No grandchildren running through the hallway, only silence. Evelyn placed a cup in front of me. "What are you going to do?" I stared into the coffee. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." I looked up. "You called Margaret." I nodded. "Then start there." At 8:30, I called Margaret Ellis. Although it was Christmas morning, she answered on the second ring. "Diana." Her voice sounded alert. "I didn't want to bother you. You aren't bothering me." For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then she asked the same question she had asked the night before. "Did they physically prevent you before? Did they physically prevent you from entering the house?" "Yes." "Did they change the locks?" "Yes." "Did Lauren tell you that you could no longer live there?" "Yes." Margaret became quiet. "How soon can you come to my office tomorrow morning? Tomorrow you from entering the house?" "Yes." "Did they change the locks?" "Yes." "Did Lauren tell you that you could no longer live there?" "Yes." Margaret became quiet. "How soon can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" "Tomorrow." "Yes, but it's the day after Christmas. I know." Something in her voice made my heartbeat quicken. "Margaret." "Yes." "Did Harold leave something?" Another silence. Finally, she said very carefully, "Your husband prepared for possibilities." Possibilities. Harold had always believed in preparation. He kept flashlights with fresh batteries. He stored extra blankets. He saved money during good years. He repaired problems before they became disasters. Still, I could not imagine what any of that had to do with me sitting in Evelyn's living room on Christmas morning. After the call ended, my phone vibrated. "Michael." I almost ignored it, but eventually I answered. "Mom." His voice sounded exhausted. "Where are you safe? Please come home." The word struck me. Home. Home. He inhaled shakily. "Please, can I use my key?" Silence. "Can I walk through my own front door?" "Mom." "No." My voice remained calm. "Answer me." Another silence. "No." I closed my eyes. "Then I don't have a home there." He began crying. I had heard my son cry only a few times in his life. When Harold died, when Emma was born, and now. Lauren says we need to discuss things. Lauren seems to discuss my future quite often. "Mom, please. Did you tell your children why I wasn't there?" He didn't answer. "Did Emma ask about me?" "Yes." "What did you tell her?" He whispered. "That Grandma wasn't feeling well." I looked toward the window. Snow covered Evelyn's yard. "That's not true." "I know." "Then stop lying for your wife." He began apologizing again. But apologies could not unlock doors. Around noon, Margaret called once more. "There's something I need you to remember. Then stop lying for your wife." He began apologizing again. But apologies could not unlock doors. Around noon, Margaret called once more. "There's something I need you to remember." "What?" "Several years ago, Harold came to see me." "Yes." He insisted on revising the family trust. I sat very still. "Why?" he worried. "About what?" She hesitated. People change when money enters a family. My throat tightened. Harold had said almost those exact words. He wasn't talking about Michael. No. Lauren, I don't think he was talking about anyone specifically. Then why Margaret spoke softly? Because Harold knew your heart. I felt tears forming. What does that mean? He wasn't talking about Michael. No. Lauren, I don't think he was talking about anyone specifically. Then why Margaret spoke softly? Because Harold knew your heart. I felt tears forming. What does that mean? He knew you would sacrifice almost anything to keep peace. That sentence hurt because it was true. I had sacrificed decorations, traditions, opinions, memories, silence, respect, everything except the house itself. And now even that had become a target. The following morning, Evelyn drove me to Margaret's office. The streets still carried leftover snow. Christmas decorations hung from storefronts. People were returning gifts, buying coffee, beginning normal lives. Meanwhile, mine felt as though it had shattered. Margaret's office sat near the courthouse, the same small office Harold had visited several times before his death. When I entered, she was already waiting. A thick folder rested on her desk. My name was written across the front. Diana Brooks. My hands trembled. Margaret opened the file carefully. This is the Brooks Family Trust. I frowned. I thought Harold left everything through a will. He did both. She adjusted her glasses. The house was transferred into the trust before Harold died. I looked at her. Why to protect you? The room suddenly felt very quiet. Margaret removed several documents. Harold was very specific. I stared at the pages. Legal language, signatures, dates. My husband's name, my own signature. I barely remembered signing some of them. He insisted that you receive lifetime occupancy rights. What does that mean? Legal language, signatures, dates. My husband's name, my own signature. I barely remembered signing some of them. He insisted that you receive lifetime occupancy rights. What does that mean? It means you have the legal right to live in that house for the rest of your life. I felt myself breathing again. No one can remove you. I swallowed. Not even Michael, no. Not Lauren, no. Tears filled my eyes. Margaret continued. There is another clause. The room suddenly felt colder, a protective provision. I looked at her. What kind of provision? She slid one page toward me. Harold's initials appeared beside several paragraphs. He wrote most of this language himself. My heart began pounding. Margaret read slowly. If any beneficiary family member, spouse, or representative attempts to force Diana Brooks from the residence, restrict her access change locks, transfer ownership, refinance, sell, or otherwise interfere with her peaceful occupancy, said individual shall immediately lose any authority concerning the property until reviewed by the trustee. I stared at her. The words barely seemed real. Lose authority. Yes. Who? Anyone involved. I could hardly breathe. What about Michael? That depends. On what? Whether he knowingly participated. I looked down at Harold's signature. My husband. My careful, thoughtful husband. The man who built bookshelves. Fixed broken cabinets. Burned Christmas fudge. And somehow, years before his death, he had imagined this possibility. Margaret spoke softly. He worried someone might pressure Michael. I remembered every conversation, the financial problems, the real estate reports, the comments about downsizing, the questions about ownership. Suddenly, everything made sense. Lauren doesn't know this? No. What happens now? Margaret folded her hands. Now we determine exactly what happened on Christmas Eve. She looked directly at me. Did Lauren tell you that the house no longer belonged to you? Yes. Did she offer alternative housing? A motel. Margaret's face hardened. Did she prevent you from entering? Yes. Did Michael intervene? No. She nodded slowly. Then your husband may have just saved you. I finally began crying. Not because of fear, not because of relief, because even after death, Harold had somehow reached across 4 years and placed his hand in mine. I looked at his signature, his familiar handwriting, his careful initials, and suddenly I understood. Lauren believed she had won. She believed changing the locks had given her control. But the very act that was supposed to remove me from my home had activated the one protection Harold had hidden inside those papers. For the first time since Christmas Eve, I felt something stronger than grief. Hope. And somewhere inside that house, Lauren Brooks still believed she held all the keys. She had no idea that Harold Brooks had left one final key behind, and it was about to unlock everything. The morning after I met with Margaret felt strangely calm. For 2 days my emotions had controlled me. Shock, humiliation, grief, anger. But now, something else had taken their place. Clarity. Harold had not left me helpless. He had seen farther than I had, and for the first time since Christmas Eve, I was no longer asking what Lauren would do next. I was asking what I had the right to do. Margaret drove us. Her silver sedan moved carefully through the remaining snow, while I sat beside her, holding the folder that contained the folder that contained the trust documents. Every few minutes, I glanced at Harold's signature, his handwriting, his initials, proof that the man I loved had somehow continued protecting me long after his death. Are you ready? Documents. Every few minutes, I glanced at Harold's signature, his handwriting, his initials, proof that the man I loved had somehow continued protecting me long after his death. Are you ready? Margaret asked. No. She smiled softly. Good. I looked at her. Good. Nobody is ever ready to walk back into a family war. I stared through the window. What if Michael hates me? Margaret kept her eyes on the road. Diana, your son already hates himself. Those words stayed with me. A second vehicle followed behind us. Samuel Green, the trustee appointed to oversee the trust if disputes occurred. Harold had selected him years earlier. I barely remembered meeting him. And behind Samuel's car was Officer Daniel Reed from the local police department. Margaret had requested his presence, not because I was breaking the law, because she wanted witnesses, protection, and peace. As we turned onto Maple Hollow Lane, my heart began pounding. The house appeared exactly as it always had. The white siding, the blue shutters, the porch Harold built, the Christmas wreath still hanging on the front door. My front door. Yet somehow it looked different, as though the house itself had become tired. Margaret parked. Take your time. I stepped out into the cold. Snow still covered portions of the yard. Footprints remained frozen on the walkway. The same porch where I had stood 2 nights earlier. The same door that had been closed in my face. Only now, I was not alone. Officer Reed approached politely. Mrs. Brooks. I nodded. Thank you for coming. We're only here to keep things calm. Samuel Green introduced himself. A quiet man in his 60s with gray hair and kind eyes. Harold spoke about you often. My throat tightened. He did? He wanted to make sure you were protected. Protected. That word seemed to follow me everywhere now. Margaret finally climbed the porch steps. She rang the bell. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the door opened. Lauren stood there. The moment she saw us, her face changed. First surprise, then confusion, then concern. What's going on? Margaret spoke calmly. My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm representing Diana Brooks. Lauren looked at me. Diana, what is this? I said nothing. Officer Reed stepped slightly forward. We'd appreciate your cooperation. Lauren looked toward the living room. Several guests were still present. Apparently, some relatives had stayed through the holiday weekend. Michael appeared in the hallway. The color immediately drained from his face. Mom Margaret opened her folder. We need to discuss the Brooks Family Trust. Lauren frowned. I don't understand. Samuel stepped forward. I represent the trustee assigned under the trust agreement. Lauren's confidence began fading. What trust? I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Because for the first time since Christmas Eve, she looked uncertain. Margaret spoke clearly. Diana Brooks possesses lifetime occupancy rights to this property. Lauren stared at her. What does that mean? It means Mrs. Brooks cannot be removed from this residence. Michael closed his eyes. Lauren looked at him. Michael, he said nothing. Margaret continued. The trust further states that any person who attempts to restrict Mrs. Brooks' access change locks, force relocation, or interfere with her residence may lose any authority involving the property. The room became very quiet. What Lauren's voice rose. What authority? Samuel answered. Any authority connected to the trust or property decisions. This is ridiculous. Officer Reed remained near the doorway. Ma'am, please remain calm. Lauren turned toward me. You called the police? I called my attorney. Michael finally spoke. Lauren, no. She looked at him. No. Her voice became sharper. You told me your father left you this house. Michael looked shattered. I thought eventually. Eventually, Margaret interrupted. The property does not become available while Diana Brooks is alive and residing here. Lauren stared at the documents. This can't be right. It is. At that moment, small footsteps crossed the hallway. Emma. She froze. Grandma. I looked at her. My heart nearly broke. She ran toward me. Lauren instinctively reached out. Emma. But the child moved past her. She wrapped both arms around my waist. Where were you? I could not speak. Noah appeared behind her. Grandma came back. The two children clung to me as though I had returned from somewhere very far away. Perhaps I had. Michael began crying quietly. I saw him turn away. Because the truth had finally become visible. Not legal documents, not trust agreements, not property rights. Simply two children who had spent Christmas without their grandmother. Margaret spoke again. Mrs. Brooks has every legal right to enter her home. Lauren folded her arms. This is my husband's house, too. No, Samuel said gently. It is the trust's property. She looked stunned. What about Michael? His interests are conditional. What does that mean? It means decisions must follow the trust provisions. Lauren's voice grew louder. This house should belong to Michael anyway. The words echoed through the room. Several relatives sitting nearby became silent. One of Lauren's cousins lowered her eyes. An elderly aunt looked uncomfortable because everyone suddenly heard what had remained hidden. Not concern, not safety, ownership. Michael stared at his wife. Lauren, no. She pointed toward me. She lives here alone. She doesn't need all this. We need help. The room remained silent. For the first time, she stopped sounding like the perfect daughter-in-law. She sounded angry, desperate, exposed. Margaret spoke quietly. Did you change the locks? Lauren hesitated. Yes. Did you tell Diana Brooks she could not enter? Yes. Did you provide alternative lodging? It was temporary. The motel. Lauren's face reddened. I was trying to avoid a fight. Samuel closed his folder. The trust review process will begin immediately. What does that mean? It means no property decisions can proceed. What decisions? Again. Silence. Michael finally looked at her. What decisions, Lauren? She looked away, and suddenly I realized something. Michael truly did not know everything. Perhaps he knew enough. Perhaps he had remained silent. But there were pieces even he had never seen. I looked around my living room, the tree, the fireplace, Harold's chair, his photograph, everything exactly where I had left it. Except now something else had changed. For 2 days I had stood outside my own life. Now I had stepped back into it. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, Lauren Brooks understood something she had never considered. She had changed the locks, but she had unlocked something far more dangerous. Harold Brooks' final promise. And that promise had just walked back through the front door. The strangest thing about victory is that it does not always feel like winning. After Margaret finished explaining the trust, after Samuel closed his folder, and after Officer Reed confirmed that I had every legal right to remain in my home, nobody celebrated. The Christmas lights still glowed. The tree still stood in the corner. The fireplace still crackled softly. But the room had changed. Secrets have a way of changing the temperature of a house. Lauren stood near the dining room doorway, her arms folded tightly across her chest. Michael sat on the sofa with his head lowered. Several relatives quietly gathered their coats, suddenly eager to leave. Nobody wanted to remain inside a family disaster. Emma and Noah stayed beside me. Emma held my hand. Noah leaned against my shoulder. Their simple affection felt more honest than every conversation that had happened during the past year. Margaret finally spoke. We'll continue the trust review privately. Samuel nodded. Mr. Brooks should also review several financial documents. Michael looked up. What documents? Samuel exchanged a glance with Margaret. The documents involving the refinancing proposal. Michael frowned. What refinancing proposal? For the first time, I saw genuine confusion on his face. Lauren immediately answered. That isn't important right now. Michael turned toward her. What refinancing proposal? She looked uncomfortable. We discussed it. No. His voice became sharper. You discussed it. Silence filled the room. Samuel opened his folder again. There were preliminary inquiries made regarding the property's equity value. Michael stared. What? Nothing happened, Lauren said quickly. Lauren. He stood. What is he talking about? She exhaled heavily. I was exploring options. For what? Our future. Our future. She looked frustrated. We need money, Michael. I know that. The business is struggling. I know. The credit cards are growing. I know. And your mother is living alone in a house worth nearly $1 million. The room became silent. Even the children stopped moving. Michael stared at his wife. $1 million. She looked at him as though the answer should have been obvious. Yes, I suddenly remembered every conversation, every question, every measurement, every photograph, every real estate report. Lauren had not been planning decorations. She had been planning possibilities. Michael sat down slowly. You told me this was about helping Mom. Every real estate report, Lauren had not been planning decorations. She had been planning possibilities. Michael sat down slowly. You told me this was about helping Mom. It is. No. He shook his head. This is about the house. Lauren's eyes filled with tears. You think I wanted this? I don't know what you wanted anymore. The words landed heavily, because neither did I. For months, I had tried to understand whether Lauren disliked me personally or simply viewed me as an obstacle. Now I finally understood. The house had become the center of everything: the school district, the business, the debts, the future. And somehow, I had become the only thing standing between Lauren and the solution she imagined. Samuel carefully removed another document. Mr. Brooks. Michael looked up. These emails may interest you. Lauren immediately stood. No, her voice was sharp. Those are private. Samuel remained calm. They concern the trust property. Michael accepted the pages. His eyes moved slowly, then stopped. He looked up. What is this? Nobody answered. He read again. I watched the color leave his face. One email, then another, and another. Finally, he whispered, You contacted developers. Lauren remained silent. You contacted 2 real estate investors. Still silence. You discussed subdivision. Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't finalized. Michael stared at her. You were planning to sell part of Mom's land. It would have helped us. Without telling her, she would never agree. Of course I wouldn't. The backyard Harold loved. The maple tree. The garden. The workshop. Everything. She had already imagined it gone. I suddenly realized why Harold had created the clause. He had not predicted Lauren specifically. He had predicted temptation, money, pressure, desperation, human weakness. Michael looked physically ill. You told me this was about safety. It started that way. No. His voice shook. It never started that way. Lauren began crying. Real tears. Perhaps guilt. Perhaps fear. Perhaps both. You don't understand what it's been like. Michael laughed bitterly. No, apparently I don't. She pointed toward me. She has everything. The room became still. Everything. What an interesting word. My husband. Gone. My Christmas. Destroyed. My son. Lost. My dignity. Taken. And yet, somehow, I had everything. I finally spoke. Lauren. She looked at me. What? You never wanted me to leave because I was old. She said nothing. You wanted me to leave because I was standing in the way. Tears rolled down her face. We needed help. You needed my house. She looked away. Michael slowly stood. Did you change the locks? Yes. Did you tell my mother she couldn't come inside? Yes. Did you give her a motel address? Yes. He closed his eyes. The room became painfully quiet. When he opened them again, something had changed. Not anger, not hatred, clarity. My father trusted you. Lauren began crying harder. I know. He trusted me. I know. He trusted us to take care of Mom. I know. He looked toward the Christmas tree, toward Harold's photograph, and finally, toward me. I failed him. The words nearly broke me, because I knew they were true, but I also knew something else. He had not failed alone. For months, he had surrendered decisions, avoided conflict, chosen silence. And silence, when someone is being pushed aside, becomes its own form of betrayal. Emma suddenly spoke. "Mom!" Everyone looked at her. Why couldn't Grandma come inside? Nobody answered. Children ask questions. Adults spend years avoiding. Emma looked at Lauren. "Grandma always comes to Christmas." Lauren began sobbing. Noah quietly said, "Grandpa wouldn't like it." The entire room fell silent, because the children had spoken the truth. Not the legal truth, the family truth. Harold would never have allowed it. Michael sat beside the fireplace. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Finally, Margaret gathered her papers. "We'll schedule a formal review." Samuel nodded. "The trust provisions remain active." Officer Reed quietly stepped outside. The visitors had already gone. The house was suddenly empty. Only family remained, or what was left of it. I walked slowly toward Harold's photograph. The same picture from Michael's wedding. The same smile. The same kind eyes. I touched the frame. "I wish you were here." Only family remained, or what was left of it. I walked slowly toward Harold's photograph. The same picture from Michael's wedding. The same smile. The same kind eyes. I touched the frame. "I wish you were here." Behind me, Michael spoke quietly. "Dad knew." I turned. "What?" "He knew this could happen." I looked at the documents. "Yes." Michael lowered his head. "He knew me better than I knew myself." "No." I walked toward him. "He knew people." Tears rolled down his face. "I should have protected you." I touched his shoulder. "You should have listened." For the first time in days, he took my hand. Not as a man trying to solve problems. Not as a husband. Not as a father. As my son. And while Lauren sat alone at the dining table, finally facing the consequences of every choice she had made, the truth became painfully clear. The hidden clause had not ruined her plan because of legal language. It ruined her plan because Harold understood something she never did. A house can be measured in dollars. A home cannot. After everyone left the house, became quiet. Too quiet. The Christmas music had stopped playing. The fire in the fireplace had nearly gone out. Half-empty coffee cups still sat on the tables and wrapping paper remained scattered across the floor. It looked as though Christmas itself had simply walked away. Samuel and Margaret stayed only long enough to explain the next legal steps. The trust review would begin immediately. Until that review was complete, no decisions involving the property could move forward. Lauren barely spoke. Michael barely moved. Eventually, Samuel stood. "Mr. Brooks, we will need additional information regarding the documents you signed." Michael looked confused. "What documents?" Samuel opened his folder. "There are several authorization forms connected to financial discussions." Michael looked toward Lauren. She looked away. "What forms?" Margaret answered. "Some involve preliminary refinancing inquiries." Michael frowned. "I thought those were planning documents." Lauren spoke quietly. "They were." "No." Margaret's voice remained calm. "They involved potential use of the property's equity." Michael stared at her. I never agreed to that. You signed the forms? I didn't read all of them. The room became silent. Lauren finally spoke. You trusted me. Michael looked at her. Yes, and I trusted that you were telling me the truth. I didn't read all of them. The room became silent. Lauren finally spoke. You trusted me. Michael looked at her. Yes, and I trusted that you were telling me the truth. She began crying again. I was trying to save us. By using my mother's house, we needed help. Michael shook his head. No. His voice was no longer angry. It was exhausted. You needed control. I sat quietly near the fireplace. For hours I had listened, watched, waited. But now I suddenly felt very tired. The anger that had carried me through the previous days was beginning to disappear. What remained was sadness. Because regardless of what happened next, my family had already changed. Emma and Noah had fallen asleep upstairs. Evelyn had returned home. The Christmas dinner dishes still sat untouched in the kitchen. And my son looked like a man who had just realized he no longer recognized his own life. Finally, he turned toward me. Mom, I looked at him. I need to say something. I nodded. He walked slowly toward me. For a moment, he looked exactly like the little boy who used to stand beside Harold when he had done something wrong. Small, scared, ashamed. I am sorry. I said nothing. He swallowed. I should have listened to you. Silence. I should have asked questions. Silence. I should have stopped this. Tears rolled down his face, and still I said nothing. Because apologies arrive differently after betrayal. They move slower. They carry more weight. They need time. Michael finally sat across from me. Please say something. I looked at him carefully. What would you like me to say that you forgive me? The honesty of his answer surprised me. I took a long breath. Michael, do you know what hurt the most? He shook his head. It wasn't Lauren. He looked confused. She isn't my daughter. He lowered his eyes. The worst part was you. Tears immediately filled his eyes again. I continued. When your father died, I thought I had lost the person who would always protect me. My voice trembled. But I still had my son. He covered his face with his hands. I know. No. I shook my head. You don't. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to speak honestly. When Lauren criticized me, I could survive that. When she removed Harold's things, I survived that. When she talked about assisted living, I survived that. When she told people I might move, I survived that. I looked directly at him. But when she locked me outside and you stayed inside, my voice finally broke. I didn't know who my son was anymore. He began sobbing. Real sobbing. The kind that comes from somewhere very deep. I was afraid. Of what? Everything. I waited, losing my marriage, losing the children, losing the house, losing our finances. He looked completely defeated. I thought if I kept everyone calm, things would get better. I nodded slowly. And instead, I lost my mother. Those words hung between us. Perhaps that was the moment everything truly changed. Because Michael finally stopped blaming Lauren, stopped blaming stress, stopped blaming money, and accepted his own responsibility. He had not locked the door, but he had allowed it to stay locked. Margaret finally spoke from across the room.
Mr. Brooks, the trust may temporarily suspend your authority regarding the property.
Michael nodded.
I understand.
Samuel looked at him kindly.
This isn't punishment.
Michael laughed softly.
It feels like it.
Samuel shook his head.
Your father wanted accountability.
Michael looked toward Harold's photograph. He knew me. Margaret answered quietly. He knew you loved your family. Then why did he write this? Because love and pressure don't always work well together. Michael lowered his head. I failed him. No, I said softly. He looked up. You failed yourself. The room became quiet again. Several minutes passed. Lauren finally stood. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen. I think I should go. Nobody stopped her. She looked toward Michael. Are you coming? He didn't answer. Michael. He slowly shook his head. I can't. She looked stunned. What? He looked at the floor. I can't leave right now. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Lauren looked at me. There was no anger in her face anymore, only exhaustion. I never wanted to hurt the children. I answered honestly. I believe that. She looked surprised. But you hurt everyone else. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I thought if we had more money, I interrupted gently. My husband spent 43 years building this home. She looked down. You saw a solution. More tears. I was scared. Perhaps she was. Fear destroys people in different ways. Some become silent, like Michael. Some become controlling, like Lauren. And some simply try to survive, like me. Lauren finally left. The front door closed quietly behind her, the same door she had locked 2 nights earlier. Only now she was the one walking away from it. After she left, Michael sat beside the fireplace for a long time. Eventually he spoke. Do you think Dad would forgive me? I looked at Harold's photograph. The man I had loved for 43 years. The man who somehow still protected me. The man who understood his son better than either of us had realized. I think your father would expect you to earn it. Michael nodded. That sounds like him. Outside snow began falling again. Inside the Christmas lights still glowed softly. For the first time in several days, nobody argued. Nobody lied. Nobody pretended. Only the truth remained. And sometimes the truth hurts because it asks us to become different people. Michael finally looked at me. Can I fix this? I answered honestly. I don't know. The tears returned. But I want to. I reached across the space between us. Not completely. Not yet. But enough to touch his hand. Because forgiveness is not a door that opens all at once. Sometimes it begins with something much smaller. A conversation. A truth. A hand reaching through the darkness. And while the trust had saved my home, something else had to save my son. The question was whether he was finally ready to save himself. The week after Christmas felt longer than the entire year before it. Snow slowly disappeared from the streets. The decorations began coming down around the neighborhood. People returned to work. Children returned to school. Life moved forward, but inside our house, time seemed to stand still. Lauren had moved into her sister's home temporarily. Michael remained in the guest bedroom downstairs. The arrangement felt strange. For nearly 10 years, my son had lived elsewhere. Now, he was sleeping under the same roof where he had grown up. Yet neither of us knew exactly what to say to one another. Some mornings we shared coffee. Some mornings we avoided each other. Both of us were learning that forgiveness moves much slower than regret. 3 days after Christmas, Michael entered the kitchen carrying a cardboard box. "What's that?" He set it carefully on the table. "I found these in the garage." I looked inside. The handmade ornaments Lauren had removed. Harold's wooden angel, the old stockings, the ceramic Santa my mother gave me. Every memory that had quietly disappeared during the previous month. I picked up the wooden angel. Harold had carved it 26 years earlier after Michael insisted that store decorations looked too perfect. My fingers trembled. I thought these were gone. Michael lowered his eyes. "I should have noticed." I said nothing, because the truth was becoming very clear. He should have noticed many things. That afternoon, he helped me decorate the house again. Not for Christmas. Christmas had already passed. But for us. The stockings returned to the fireplace. Harold's photograph returned to the dining room. The angel returned above the mantel. At one point, Michael stopped and stared at the room. "It looks like home again." I looked at him. It always was. His eyes filled with tears. The following weekend, Emma and Noah came to visit. Lauren allowed it. Perhaps she understood that the children needed stability. Perhaps she needed space herself. The moment Emma entered the house, she hugged me tightly. "Grandma, are you staying forever?" I smiled. "Yes." She looked relieved. "Good." Noah walked directly to Harold's workshop. "Can we build something?" The question nearly broke my heart. Harold had spent countless Saturdays in that workshop with Michael. Now the next generation stood in the same doorway. Michael looked uncertain. "I don't know if I remember how," I answered softly. "Your father taught you." He looked toward the workbench. Tools still hung exactly where Harold left them. Dust covered some shelves, but the room still smelled like cedar and old wood. For several hours, Michael and Noah built a small birdhouse. They made mistakes, measured incorrectly, started over. At one point, Noah asked, "Did Grandpa teach you this?" Michael nodded. "Yes." "Was Grandpa good at it?" Michael laughed through tears. "He was better than me." I watched from the doorway. For the first time in many months, I saw my son instead of the man who had failed me. Not because he deserved forgiveness, because I finally saw how lost he had become. That evening, after the children fell asleep, Michael sat beside me in the living room. The house was quiet. Only the clock ticked softly. "Mom." "Yes, I met with Samuel." I looked at him. "And the trust review is almost finished." I nodded. He looked nervous. "My authority regarding the property is suspended." I had expected that. "Are you upset?" He shook his head. "No." He stared into the fireplace. "Dad was right." "About what?" "Me?" I remained quiet. "I wanted everybody to be happy." He laughed bitterly. "So I avoided every difficult conversation." His voice became softer. "I let Lauren make decisions." "Why?" He thought carefully. "Because I was tired." That answer felt painfully honest. Work, debt, marriage, children, expectations, life. Sometimes Exhaustion makes people surrender responsibilities they should keep. I didn't realize how much power I had given away. I looked toward Harold's photograph. Your father never avoided difficult conversations. Michael smiled sadly. I know. The following Monday, Lauren called. It was the first time we had spoken since she left. Her voice sounded quiet. Could we meet? I hesitated. Why? I need to apologize. Part of me wanted to refuse. Another part remembered what grief had taught me. People rarely become better without being heard. So, we agreed to meet at a small cafe near the courthouse. She arrived early. She looked different. Not physically, emotionally. The confidence was gone. The certainty had disappeared. She looked tired, very tired. I don't expect forgiveness, she said immediately. I remained silent. She folded her hands. I've replayed Christmas Eve 1,000 times. Good. Tears appeared in her eyes. I don't know why I became that person. I answered honestly. I think you do. She nodded slowly. Money. She looked down. Fear. Another pause. And jealousy. That surprised me. Jealousy. She nodded. Michael loved that house. I remained quiet. He talked about his father constantly. Her voice trembled. The children loved being there. She wiped her eyes. And sometimes I felt like I could never compete with memories. For the first time, I understood something. Not an excuse. An explanation. She had not simply wanted the house. She wanted the place the house held in my son's heart. And she had tried to control it. I thought if we owned it, maybe it would become ours. I looked at her carefully. It was already yours. She looked confused. When you married Michael, you became family. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I ruined that. Yes. The honesty surprised her. But ruining something and losing it forever are not always the same. She cried openly then. Not because of money, not because of the trust, because for the first time she understood what she had actually destroyed. Not property, trust. When I returned home, Michael was waiting. How did it go? I sat beside the fireplace. She's sorry. He looked hopeful. Really? Yes. And I looked at him. That doesn't make Christmas disappear. He nodded. I know. Outside, the sun began setting. The house glowed softly in the evening light. Harold's photograph remained above the mantel. The children laughed upstairs, and for the first time since Christmas Eve, something had begun to grow inside these walls again. Not happiness. Not yet. Something quieter. Something slower. Hope. Because sometimes families break all at once. But healing happens differently. Healing returns one conversation at a time, one apology, one truth, one act of courage. And although none of us fully understood it yet, the hardest part was still ahead. Because soon I would have to decide whether protecting my home also meant protecting my heart. And those two things are not always the same. By the middle of January, the snow had begun to melt. Small patches of grass appeared along Maple Hollow Lane. Icicles disappeared from the rooftops. The Christmas decorations had been packed away, and the neighborhood slowly returned to ordinary life. But inside our family, nothing felt ordinary. Michael had moved back into his own house. Lauren had returned a week later. The children were together again. Yet everyone knew things had changed. Trust does not return simply because people apologize. It returns when people become different. One Saturday morning, Samuel called. The trust review is complete. I sat quietly at the kitchen table. And the provisions remain in effect. I nodded. What happens now? That's largely your decision. My decision. Those words felt strange. For weeks, other people had been making decisions about my life. Now the choice belonged to me. Samuel continued. Michael's authority regarding the property remains suspended, and Lauren, she has no legal authority concerning the home. I looked around the kitchen. Harold's kitchen. My kitchen. The sunlight falling across the table where we had shared 43 years of breakfasts. What would Harold do? I asked. Samuel smiled softly. Harold planned carefully. Yes, but he also loved his family. After the call ended, I walked into Harold's workshop. The birdhouse Michael and Noah had built sat on the workbench, crooked, uneven, imperfect, but finished. For some reason, that small birdhouse felt important. Because healing rarely looks beautiful at first. Sometimes it looks rough. Sometimes it looks unfinished. Sometimes it simply proves that people are trying. Later that afternoon, Michael came to visit alone. He looked nervous. Can we talk? I nodded. We sat on the porch swing Harold had built decades earlier. The winter air remained cold. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Michael said, Lauren started counseling. I looked at him. She wanted me to tell you. I nodded. She also met with a financial advisor. And we're selling the business. That surprised me. Her design company. He nodded. It was losing money. I understood now. The debts, the pressure, the fear. All of it had been growing for much longer than I realized. Michael looked down at his hands. She said something that surprised me. What? She said she spent years competing with Dad. I looked toward the house. Competing. She thought she could never become the most important person in my life. My chest tightened, and he smiled sadly. I told her nobody could replace him. The silence felt gentle. Then he added, but nobody needed to. Those words stayed with me, because perhaps that had been Lauren's greatest mistake. She thought love was limited. She thought my place in the family reduced her own. She thought the house belonged to the person who controlled it. She never understood that families grow by making room, not by pushing people out. A few days later, Lauren asked to visit. This time, she came alone. No confidence, no expensive coat, no carefully prepared explanations. She simply stood at my front door. The same door, the same porch, the same place where everything had changed. I opened it. She looked at me with tears already in her eyes. I understand if you don't want me here. I stepped aside. Come in. She entered slowly. Her eyes moved around the room. Harold's photograph, the old decorations, the bookshelves, the family pictures. For a moment, she simply stood there. I removed so many things. Yes, I don't know why. I answered honestly. I think you do. She nodded. Control. Another pause. Fear. She looked toward Harold's photograph, and jealousy. We sat in the living room. For nearly an hour she spoke. About money, about debt, about feeling inadequate, about believing she had to create the perfect family,
about being afraid that Michael loved his memories more than his future. When she finished, she looked at me. I became someone I don't recognize. I thought about that carefully. People usually recognize themselves. She lowered her eyes. That may be true. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered, "Why are you being kind to me?" The answer surprised even me. Because Harold would have been. Tears immediately filled her eyes. "I locked you outside." "Yes, I told you it wasn't your house." "Yes, I hurt your children." "Yes." She began crying. "And you're still sitting here." I looked toward the window. Snow was falling again, very lightly. "Because if I spend the rest of my life punishing you, then Christmas Eve wins." She covered her face, and for the first time, I believed her regret was real. Not because of the trust, not because of the money, because she finally understood what she had done. A week later, I invited everyone for dinner. Michael, Lauren, Emma, Noah, Evelyn. It was the first time our entire family had gathered since Christmas. The atmosphere felt cautious. The children seemed relieved. Michael looked nervous. Lauren remained quiet. Halfway through dinner, Noah suddenly stood up. "I made something." He ran upstairs and returned carrying the small birdhouse. "Dad and I made this." He placed it in the center of the table. "It isn't perfect." Everyone laughed. "No," Michael said. "It isn't." Noah smiled, "But Grandpa would like it." He ran upstairs and returned carrying the small birdhouse. "Dad and I made this." He placed it in the center of the table. "It isn't perfect." Everyone laughed. "No," Michael said. "It isn't." Noah smiled, "But Grandpa would like it." Silence filled the room. Emma looked at me. "Would he?" I looked at Harold's photograph. "Yes." The children took the birdhouse outside afterward. Michael followed them. Lauren remained beside me in the kitchen. "Do you think we'll ever be normal again?" I smiled softly. "No." She looked worried. "Really?" "No family stays the same after something like this." She lowered her eyes. "But families can become honest." Later that evening, after everyone left, I sat alone beside the fireplace. The house was quiet, the same quiet I had feared after Harold died. But now it felt different, not empty, peaceful. I looked at his photograph. I understand now. Harold had not written the hidden clause because he expected betrayal. He wrote it because he understood human weakness. He knew people make mistakes. He knew fear changes people. He knew money creates pressure. And most importantly, he knew that one day I might forget my own worth. The clause protected the house, but it also protected me. And now, sitting in the home we built together, I finally realized his last gift had never been legal protection. It was permission. Permission to remain. Permission to matter. Permission to never again stand outside my own life, asking to be invited inside. Spring arrived quietly that year. The snow melted from Maple Hollow Lane. The maple tree outside my window slowly grew green again. Birds returned to the backyard. The porch swing Harold built creaked softly in the evening breeze. Life, despite everything, continued. Sometimes I think that is one of God's greatest mercies. No matter how broken our hearts become, the seasons keep moving. And eventually, if we allow it, so do we. 3 months passed after Christmas. The trust review officially ended. Samuel visited one final time. He placed several documents on my kitchen table. The trust remains exactly as Harold intended. I nodded. And Michael? He understands the conditions. And Lauren? Samuel smiled gently. I believe Lauren understands far more than legal documents now. Perhaps she did. Life had changed for all of us. Michael and Lauren sold the struggling business. They began working with a financial counselor. Marriage counseling continued. The children seemed happier. And for the first time in years, nobody discussed my house. Not the value, not the property, not the future sale. Simply the house. The home. The place where our family gathered. One Sunday afternoon, Michael asked if he could help me clean Harold's workshop. At first I hesitated. That room had remained almost untouched since Harold died. His tools, his workbench, his coffee mug, his old radio. Everything sat exactly where he had left it. For years, I had been afraid to change anything. Perhaps because changing it felt like losing him again. Michael stood beside the doorway. We can leave it exactly as it is. I looked around the room. Dust covered some shelves. The workbench needed repair. Several tools had rusted. No, I said quietly. It's time. We spent the entire afternoon together. Sometimes we worked. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we simply stood silently, holding old objects. Michael found one of Harold's notebooks. Inside were measurements, woodworking sketches, shopping lists, and one folded sheet of paper. My name appeared on the front. Diana. My hands began shaking. I carefully unfolded it. The handwriting belonged to Harold. If you're reading this, then something probably happened that worried me. Michael has a good heart, but sometimes good hearts become weak when life becomes difficult. And you, my beautiful Diana, have always been willing to sacrifice yourself to keep peace. Please don't. This house was never meant to trap you. It was built to protect you. Love your family. Forgive them if they deserve it, but never disappear for someone else's comfort. You belong here. I could barely breathe. Michael sat beside me, reading over my shoulder. Tears rolled down both our faces. He knew us. I nodded. He always did. That evening, we placed Harold's note beside his photograph in the living room. Not because visitors needed to see it. Because we did. Several weeks later, Emma had a school concert. For the first time in a long time, all of us attended together. Me, Michael, Lauren, Noah, even Evelyn. The children stood on stage singing spring songs while parents filled the auditorium. Halfway through the concert, Emma spotted me. She smiled, and suddenly I remembered the terrible question she had asked months earlier. Grandma, are you moving away? The answer had become very clear. No. After the concert, Emma slipped her small hand into mine. Grandma. Yes? Will Christmas be normal this year? I looked down at her. Children ask the questions adults are afraid to ask. I smiled. No. She looked worried. No. I bent down. It will be better. She smiled. Promise. Promise. Summer arrived. The family returned for Sunday dinners. Slowly. Carefully. No one pretended Christmas had never happened. We talked about it. Sometimes painfully. Sometimes honestly. Michael never excused himself. Lauren never defended herself. Both of them accepted responsibility. And because of that, healing slowly entered our home. One evening, in late August, Lauren and I sat alone on the porch. The sun was setting, the same porch where Harold once sat beside me. She looked toward the yard. "I almost destroyed everything," I answered honestly. "Yes." She nodded. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself." I thought carefully. That isn't the goal. She looked at me. What is becoming someone who wouldn't do it again? She quietly cried. For the first time, I reached over and held her hand. Not because I had forgotten, because I had finally chosen. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is deciding that pain will not own the future. That autumn, Michael built another birdhouse with Noah. Emma painted it blue. Lauren planted flowers, and for the first time in years, laughter returned naturally. No one forced it. No one performed it. It simply came home. One evening, I sat alone beside the fireplace. The same chair, the same room. Harold's photograph above the mantel. The old wooden angel nearby. Outside, leaves were falling. I looked toward his picture. You saved me. But the truth was larger than that. Harold had not only saved me, he had saved our family. The hidden clause was never truly about money. It was not about property. It was not even about ownership. It was about dignity. About making sure the woman he loved would never stand outside her own life asking permission to enter. And because of his wisdom, because of his love, and because of one piece of paper, nobody expected our family was forced to face the truth. Sometimes the people who hurt us are the people who need saving too. And sometimes the strongest lock is not the one placed on a door. It is the fear inside people's hearts. Harold left me a home. He left me protection. But most importantly, he left me one final lesson. Never surrender your place in the family you helped build. Because love should open doors, never close them.